and welcome to Darvanalee Designs Studio. For those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reed, and today we start our sew along series, much anticipated sew along series for the large mountain retreat bag. So basically what you need to do is head over to the website. It's darvanaleedesignsstudio.com, and you will find your pattern there. You can purchase your pattern, then come on back and we can get started on the bag. So we're going to be breaking this series up into a few parts. We're going to focus today on the outside of the bag and the sides, as well as the lining. Then next week we will be focusing on the internal pockets, and then we'll just progress through the pattern as we go, taking it step by step. So at the end of the series, you end up with this gorgeous bag, and you'll be able to take it to all your retreats, or whenever you go away. You might even like to use it as a large makeup bag. All right, so let's get started. Okay, so thank you so much for joining along with our stitch along for the DD's Mountain Retreat bag. This is the large one that we're working on today. We are breaking this up into several videos, and we're going to go step by step throughout the pattern. So the first thing that you need to do is head over to our website and grab that pattern. There is a link down below this video where you can get that from. It's an instant download, so you won't have to wait around too long for it. You're not going to need a ton of hardware or anything like that, although you are going to need some zips. You're going to also need either an open-ended zip or a zip by the yard for the outside zip, and just regular nylon zippers for the inside. So just to show you the inside, we do have several pockets in here. So we've got 6 internal pockets. We've also got a flat pocket, and we've also got this mesh pocket at the front as well. We'll be installing a lace zipper and just some normal regular zippers as well. All right, so today what we're going to be working on in our first part of the series is our exterior and our lining and our side panels. So the first thing that you need to cut is both lining and exterior and side panels, and you're also going to need to cut your fusible fleece for the exterior and the lining, and your woven interfacing for the side panels. Now, as I said, I'm going to break this up, and each week I'm going to release a new video, and we're going to slowly work through the pattern. You will need to get the pattern because I won't be giving you any sizes or anything like that. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of this big bag and close that up. All right, so you can see here that I've got the pattern, and I've got my exterior fabric and my lining fabric. So the stripes is my lining, and this is my exterior, and these are the sides to my bag, and then this is the woven interfacing. Now you can use Shapeflex 101 or Vilene. Medium or lightweight interfacing will be fine. It's just to give it a little bit of stability. And then I like to use fusible fleece. Now if you can't get hold of fusible fleece, you can use just normal everyday batting, but you are going to need to have some sort of basted glue or something along those lines just to hold it in place, and obviously your safety pins, your curved safety pins, so you can pin it all down and it won't move on you while you're quilting it. Now I'm just going to be doing basic quilting on mine. You can quilt it any way you want. So you can see here I have just done a crosshatch, and they're about 2 inches apart. So I've got that diamond pattern on the outside. It's quick, it's simple, and it's easy to do. But if you want to practice some of your quilting, by all means go ahead and do that. If you are going to do that, you are going to need to make your wadding just slightly bigger, because it's going to pull in a little bit, okay? And your fabric also slightly bigger. The fusible fleece, you don't need to worry about that as long as you lengthen your stitch length, but I'll go into all that as we're going along. And also on the lining, we do a little bit of quilting on that as well. And you can see here I've just done a basic grid pattern just to keep it nice and simple and quick to do. The side panels don't get any quilting on them whatsoever, so we don't need to worry about that. All right, so I've already cut my fabrics out for both my side and for my exterior and my lining, and I've also matched up my fusible fleece and my interfacing. So I'm ready to go. So I'm going to head over to the ironing board, and I'm just going to press that on to the wrong side of the fabric for both of all the pieces. Okay, now just follow the manufacturer's guidelines on that. But my suggestion is, if you are working with a fusible fleece, just turn the heat down a little bit on your iron. from what the manufacturer recommends. Now, my favorite fusible fleece, anybody that's been following me for a while knows that it's Matilda's Own. It can be a little bit tricky to get at times. So anything from Legacy, Pellon, or any of those ones, that you'll be able to use that. It's exactly the same. Although the Pellon one is slightly thinner than this one, but it still gives you the same effect. Okay, so a few other things that you're also going to need is you're going to need a rotary cutter, you're going to need some scissors, marking devices. You're also going to need some thread snips, maybe some pins, and also some wonder clips. I do recommend that you have wonder clips if you've got them. If you don't, I'll leave a link down below where you can actually get some. And you're also going to need a quilting ruler as well. And this is something that you can have if you want to have it. You don't necessarily need it, and I'm not going to actually use it because I just find it easier just to mark my fabric, and that's the way I always do it. But this is a quilting guide. It's a 1/4 inch foot with a quilting guide. So basically what that means is that you can set it at different points. So say you wanted your space between your quilting lines to be 3 inches, well then you can have it at 3 inches, or you can alternatively have it down to 1 inch. That's entirely up to you. So you pop this onto your sewing machine and you stitch your first line, and then you basically line up your quilting guide onto that line, and then you know that it'll be 1 inch from where your needle is to that side there, and this will run along that line that you've already stitched. Long-winded way of doing things. I don't necessarily do it. Sometimes I do, depending on what project. If it's a big project, I probably would. But something like this, I'm just going to use my ruler, and I'm just going to use my marking device. And because most people don't actually have them, but I will leave a link down below if it's something that you'd like to try. Personally, I don't use them. They sit in my machine because I just find it easier to mark it with the ruler. All right, so I'm going to head over to the ironing board, and then I'm going to show you what we'll do next. Okay, so we've got that all on there, and we can see our fleeces on, and we've also got our interfacing on our sides. Now the side pieces you can just set aside for a moment, so leave them off to the side, and we're just going to focus on our exterior fabric for just a moment. Set our lining piece away. Okay, so if you have non-directional fabric, you can just cut it as you want. If you have directional fabric, you'll need to add a little bit onto the length. So add an extra 1/2 inch to 1 inch on. And then basically what you're going to do is you're going to cut that piece in half, and then you're going to join it. So when you wrap your bag up, your fabric is going the right direction on both sides. So I've just mocked that up to show you what it looks like. So you can see here now my scallops are facing up on both sides. Whereas if I didn't do that, I would have ended up with one set of the scallops going one way and the other set of the scallops going the other way. So basically all I've done is I've cut that piece a little bit longer, so I'm not going to give you the measurement. So whatever that measurement is in there, that is if it's non-directional fabric. If you have directional fabric, then you need to add 1 inch onto the length of it, not the width, but the length. Okay, and then you're going to cut it in half, and then you're just going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and hopefully you can see there. I have just used a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then I've pressed those seams open, and then basically I just fused the fusible fleece to it. Now I'm not concerned that this is going to come apart or anything like that, because I've actually reduced my stitch length down to a 2. Okay, so you want to go for a smaller stitch, a tighter stitch, because nothing's going to go through this. You're going to quilt over the top of it with an elongated stitch. You're not going to be putting any pressure on this. Yes, it's going to be part of the bag, but the fusible fleece and the lining and everything else is going to help this stay together. So as long as you've got that smaller stitch in there, there's no problem of it coming apart. So you can see there where it is fused to the fleece, the seam isn't coming apart. Just make sure that you backstitch at the beginning, at the end, like anything else that you do, and then that way it's going to stay in place for you and not come apart. Now you can see here that I've actually got a little bit bigger piece of interfacing the fusible fleece, because I wasn't sure what size it was going to be in the end. So I just made it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to cut that excess off. So to do that, all I'm going to do is grab my rotary cutter and ruler, line it up at the edge of the fabric, and then discard that piece. Okay, and this was a little bit bigger because it was a scrap piece out of my cut-off bin, so you can see it was quite a large piece. So I've made another project and I had this piece left, so I've put it into my cut-off bins. So sometimes they're not quite the right size, or they'll be a little bit wider. So always, you know, save those bits and pieces. They come in handy. All right, so we are now ready to start working with our exterior piece. So we're at step 1, okay, and we're going to start with the exterior fabric. So if you want to read along with me, you can, but it's not necessary because I'm just going to show you what to do anyway. All right, so we've done all our fusing and all the rest of it. We're just going to grab our ruler, and then all I'm going to do is from one corner to the other. Even though this is a rectangle, I'm still going to do it this way. I'm going to grab my marking tool, so I'm using a friction pen. Now there is controversy about the friction pen. You can use chalk marker if you like, it's up to you. I've never had any problems with the friction pen or anything like that. And basically all I'm going to do is from one corner to the next corner, and I'll just make sure that you can see that. So you can see my ruler's up on that corner, and then I'm heading down to this corner. Obviously it's not long enough, so what I generally do is I just grab another ruler and I just butt it up. Okay, so I make sure that this edge here is lining up, and then I'll move the ruler so I'm going from corner to corner. Now the reason I do that, even though this is not square, it's just going to give me that guideline, and then I'm going to go 2 inches from that line, make another line, and so forth and so on until I get down to this end, and then I'm going to do it to the same to the other end. So I mark my first line, and these are just guidelines. If you don't sew directly on it, don't stress about it. Oh, seriously, like there's no need to stress. All right, then I'm just going to line the 2-inch. So I've got my pink line there, and then I'm going to line that 2-inch mark on my ruler onto that line that I just marked. Okay, and then again, I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to continue doing that all the way to this corner, and then I'll come back and do it all the way to this corner. Okay, so we've gone one way, and now we're going to go the opposite way. So I will turn my fabric so I can get it to line up and make sure that you can see it on camera. So again, I'm just going to pop my ruler on that corner there, and then I'll have to get my other one like I did before and line it up. So I just butt it up against this ruler here, and then I use it as one ruler. So lining up my corners, and then I can mark that. Now I can get rid of the little one, and now I can just continue marking. So you might find it easier to turn your fabric as I am here, and then I'm just going to go down. And if you have to, you can just move your ruler along, so you can slide it up and down that line. It doesn't have to be meeting the edge. As long as you keep that 2-inch line on that line you just marked, it will stay true and correct. And you can see there that I'm getting this large diamond. All right, so I'm going to continue on. Okay, so you can see there, and I'm not sure that you can see it real close, so I'll zoom in so you can see it. You can see I've got a diamond pattern there. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing to our lining fabric, except we're going to do a cross, instead of a cross hatch, we're just going to do like a checkerboard. So basically all I do for this one is I just start at the beginning here, sorry, reflection off the light, and I'm just going to mark 2 inches, and then I'm just going to line that 2-inch mark up and go all the way down the fabric. Okay, so we've done our gridding of our pattern. So we've got just like a grid pattern there, and then we've got a cross hatch here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the sewing machine, and we are going to get our matching threads for the whatever fabric that you're using to match up. So you can have it so it's quite bold so you can see it coming up onto the fabric, or you can have it so it's blending and you can't see the quilting. That's entirely up to you. As I said, this is a time that if you want to practice or anything like that, by all means you can do that, but just make sure that these are a little bit wider and a little bit longer than what is recommended in the pattern, and then you can always cut it down to the correct size from there. With the fusible fleece, we don't have to worry about that. I have never, and I have made many of these bags, never had any problem with the fabrics not being the correct size once I'm finished quilting. In saying that though, that I haven't done a lot of quilting on it. I've always just done the crosshatch and all the grid pattern on that. So let's head over to the sewing machine and get sewing. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine. I have my sewing machine already set up. I'm just going to be using a straight stitch today, and I'm going to elongate that up to about a 3.5 to 3. So you'll need to test your machine, and I'll show you what I mean. So basically what I do before I start any project, I basically just get a piece of fabric and I just test what my stitch length is going to be. So I'm just going to use my 1/4 inch foot today, and I'm just going to follow the line because I've already drawn the line, so I don't need to worry about it. And I've just moved my stitch length. You can probably hear that beeping. And I've just moved that up to about a 3.5, and the width of my, like the spacing between it, is about the same size. And I'm just going to stitch away at that. And I can see, and I'll bring it out, I can see that that is just too small. Okay, so I want that to be bigger. All right, so I've got, that was at just under a 3, and now I've got it at around about a 3.5. So it's probably just that little bit too big because it was just a little bit past that. Okay, so I'll show you this one. I'm not sure if it'll show up or not, but you can see there that I've got a nice long stitch. It's not too long like a basting stitch, but it's still long enough that it's going to sit nice and straight going through the thickness of the batting or of the fusible fleece, whichever you're using. Now you don't want it to be too long, so you don't want it to look like a basting stitch as such as what you might do around like a non-fusible interfacing. You would sew an 1/8 of an inch around the edge. This is just a little bit longer. It makes it easy to stitch through the thickness, and it gives a nice neat finish. Now I can I'll zoom in a little bit closer once I've done this, and you'll be able to see what it looks like. All right, so I can take that piece out. I know that that is in the right position now for the stitch length, and all I'm going to do is grab my fabric and I'm going to start in the center. So that first line that you drew, that's the first line that you're going to stitch on. So you can see there, I've just popped that into the sewing machine. I've put the presser foot down. I'm putting the needle into the down position if your machine's got that capability. If not, hand crank it into the down position. It just makes it easier if you've got to stop. You're going to be sitting at the sewing machine for just a little while now, so you want to make yourself as comfortable as possible. And I like to drive barefoot, so off come the thongs. And basically you are just going to follow those lines. And I just let the fabric feed through. And you can see there, I can adjust it now because the needle's in the down position, and the fabric is not going to move side to side or backwards and forwards, and I can adjust it accordingly. Now, as I said, it doesn't matter if you don't sew directly on the line, if you sew a little bit off to the side, if you sew either left or right, or it doesn't really matter. This is just a guideline for you. And all I do is, like I'm pretty accurate and I'm on the line. But if I go off a little bit, I'm not going to worry because those lines are going to iron away. But what I try to do, and you probably can't see this on camera, but my 1/4 inch foot has a slight gap in it all the way to the end. So basically I just make sure that that line is somewhere in the center of that gap. Okay, it's such a small gap, it's really hard to see where it is. So I just try and center it as best as I can. If you are struggling with your presser foot that you've got try using an open toe foot, and if you don't have one, there is a link down below where you'll be able to purchase one of those. They're a great accessory to have with your sewing machine because you can use them for your quilting. Straight line quilting makes it really easy to see the marks that you have made on your fabric, and also for applique quilting as well. So if you're machine appliquing your quilt, it's really good for that as well because you can see so clearly of where you've got to go, and it's really easy to make a mark on it so you can line up the edge of the applique fabric, and then you can adjust your stitching from there. All right, so I'm going to continue on with this and get to the end and then show you what it looks like, and hopefully you'll be able, it'll pick up on camera because I am using a cream thread on this particular one. Now you can do a back stitch here if you want, or if you've got a lock off stitch you can do that as well. It's not necessary. I don't necessarily worry about it. Bring the needle up and hopefully you'll be able to see that. So you can see there that I've just stitched on that line and it's a decent size stitch. You could probably actually go a little bit bigger, but it's stitching straight. It doesn't feel, I can't feel the stitching on the back, so it doesn't feel like, I like to equate it to like braille. It doesn't feel like that. So yeah, it is good tension and it's a good stitch length. All right, so I'm going to continue on doing that, and then we will do the same thing with the lining as well. Okay, so we've quilted our exterior and we've quilted our lining. Now don't forget that these two pieces, they need to remain separate. All right, so basically what you're going to do now is you're just going to get your thread snips and get rid of any of these excess threads that you might have hanging around. Okay, once you've done that, you're just going to set these aside. You can give them a press and get rid of all your lines and everything like that. But for now, we're going to set them aside. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to move on to is our side panels. And we have our two pieces here. I've already put my interfacing on when I put the interfacing onto our exterior and lining fabric. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is from our pattern piece, we need to get our template. So on the back of your pattern, on the last page, there will be a pattern piece there. We're going to cut that out with some paper scissors. Okay, so once you've cut out your pattern piece, you're going to take your side panels, and basically what you're going to do is we're just going to work with one at a time. You're going to fold this in half, and you're going to have the right sides touching. What to do is you're going to grab your pins, and you are going to pin along this long open edge, and you're going to do that all the way along, and then you will repeat for the second one. Okay, so once you have your pieces all pinned together, what you're going to do now is you're just going to set one of them aside, and you're going to grab your pattern piece and your marking tool, and then what you're going to do is you're going to place this point down here into the corner, and then this on the fold up here. Okay. It doesn't have to be exactly on the fold because we are going to use our ruler. This is just a guide for us to make sure that we have got the angle right. Okay. So making sure that that point is right in the corner, and then we can just grab our ruler, place that onto the template there, and then just draw a line. Okay. All right. So at this point in time, I like to just pop a pin in here, and that's going to hold that for me. And I know that that isn't going to move. And I'll just make sure that I've got that angle right. Everything in the right place. And I do. So I'm good to go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the other end and I'm going to flip my template over and again place that in the corner. And it's this bottom bit that I'm lining up. This is the placing on the fold is just giving you the idea that you need to be up near the fold with that end of the template. Okay, and then again you're going to draw your line. You don't want to draw on the paper, you actually want to draw on the fabric. I keep getting the paper there. Okay, all right, so you can set your template aside and you're going to repeat exactly the same thing with your other piece. So again, placing the fold away from you, grabbing your template, popping it onto the corner, making sure that we've got the right angles, grabbing our ruler, making sure that this short edge is up near the fold, okay, and then flip it and come down to the other end. And that is going to give our angles for each side of the bag. So just making sure that it is all staying in place. I'm going to pop a pin in there and I'm going to do the same down the other side. And now we've got both our side pieces ready to go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our ruler and our rotary cutter and we're going to cut that piece off. Okay, then you're going to get your pin and just pop it in there so that just stays together. And then you're going to repeat on the other side. Again, place your ruler on that line and trim that bit off. Take your pin and pop it in there so they stay together. So essentially you've got a piece like that. All right, the next that you're going to do that to your second piece. Okay, so once you've done that, now what we're going to do is we are going to head to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch down these sides here using a 1/4 inch seam allowance going all the way down. Okay, so let's head over to the sewing machine and stitch that down. Okay, so we're back at the sewing machine. We want to take our stitch length down to just a normal stitch length now, so we're not quilting. So whatever your default setting is on your machine, if you're not sure what that is, turn your machine on and off and it will put it back to itself, to its default position. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our side panels and on the angles that we cut, we're going to use our 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay, and we're just going to stitch straight down. But make sure that you do a back stitch at the beginning and a back stitch at the end. Okay, so you can see there that I have just stitched that. Get rid of your loose threads and then do the opposite end. So, and all we do is we just flip that over. Again, doing our 1/4 inch seam allowance and a back stitch when we start and a back stitch when we end. And you're going to repeat that for the second one as well. Okay, so we've top stitched those up, sorry, not top stitch, we've a 1/4 inch seam allowance those all the way down. Okay, so now what we need to do is we just need to remove the pins from the bottom end of our side panels and we're going to grab our pinking shears and we're just going to reduce some of that bulk down the sides there without cutting into the stitching that we just done. Okay, and we're going to repeat that for this side as well. So you can see there, I'm just cutting near the stitching without cutting into it. Okay, and repeat for the other one. All right, so we've finished with the pinking shears. We can put those away. We've removed all our pins, and now what we're going to do is we're just going to turn that in the right way. Okay, just poking up into the corner to give us a nice finish. And same with this side. And all I do for that is I just put my thumbnail or my index nail in there and give it a nice little push out. and then I run my finger down the seam. All right, so the next thing that we need to do once we've done that is we're going to press it. Okay, so we're just going to grab our ironing pad and our iron, and we're just going to turn that up a little bit to cotton, and I'm just going to run my fingers down the edge where that seam is and get that to sit nicely, and then I'm going to give that a really good press. So you want to make sure that you've got a nice crisp edge there and that your raw edge is lining up down the bottom. Okay, and I always start with my seams first, so I'll flip it around and do the other one. Now, if you are using directional fabric with this one, the upside down side is going to be on the inside of the bag. So you can see here that my scallops are upside down. So this will be into the inside of the bag, and I'll show you why in a moment, because you can't really see the inside of the bag, but the outside will be up the correct way. So this is my outside, and then this is my inside. All right, so once you've got your seams all set in place, you're going to give it a really good press, making sure that your raw edges down the bottom here are actually lining up. And we're going to pop a couple of pins in there because we're going to head back to the sewing machine and we are going to do some top stitching. Now, I'm not going to move the camera to show you the top stitching. I will just show you what it looks like on the bag that I've already got made here. Okay, so we're going to press all that into place, and as I said, we're going to pin that down the bottom, and we're going to make sure that our raw edges are lining up of our fabric, not so much our inner facing. That's fine, we can trim that off in just a sec when we finish stitching. And the reason that I'm getting you to pin along here is so this doesn't move when we're sewing it. So basically what you're going to do, as I said, we're going to top stitch that. So we're going to head to the sewing machine, and I'll show you what I was talking about before. I'll just move this out of the way. So you can see here that I've got a top stitch all the way, and we're also going to do it along our raw edge as well, and we're going to go across the top. Now, what I was talking about before with the directional fabric, see, this is the part of the fabric that you're going to see, but most of the fabric is actually covered up by the bags on the inside, so you don't need to cut two separate pieces for that in the directional fabric. If it's really going to bother you, then you'll need to add an extra inch onto that, but I never get bothered by it, and nor do anybody else that I know. All right, so yeah, so basically we're just going to now top stitch both of those, and I'm not going to worry about moving the camera for that because it's not going to take long at all. Just make sure that everything is really pressed really well. If you're concerned that it is going to move a little bit from the top as well, by all means, pop a couple of pins in there as well, and it won't move on you at all. Okay, so head over to the sewing machine using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to top stitch all the way along here, all the way along the top. You'll stop an 1/8 of an inch away, pivot and come down, and then you're going to also do all the way along this raw edge to close that up. And the reason that we do it along that raw edge is so when it comes time to assembling the bag, it's not shifting on us. All right, so I'm going to continue doing that with this one, and then I'll stitch them down and show you what they look like. Okay, so both of our pieces are now all stitched into place, and you can see here that I've just cut the dog ears off this one. So all you need to do for that is just grab your little thread snips and just take those dog ears off, and that just cleans up those corners. If you've got any inner facing that's sticking out or anything like that, by all means clean that up if you need to. And all I do for that is I just pop my ruler along the edge of the fabric, and anything that's sticking out past that, such as inner facing, will be gone. Okay, so that is it for today's part of our class. So we really do hope that you enjoyed sewing along with us. You've done your exterior fabric with a diamond crosshatch, then you've done a checkerboard style for the lining, and we've also made our side panels. So set those aside for now. You will need them a little bit later on in this series. We do hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up down below. Also hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon beside it, and that way you won't miss out on any future posts. And don't forget to join us next week for part 2, where we are starting on the internal pockets on our bag. And for those that don't know, my name's Nicole Reid for Darvanalee Designs Studio, and I'll see you all again next week for part 2 of this video. Bye for now.